voting then, and we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, so for this session, building a circular economy innovation center in the West, myself, Megan Lane, and Jennifer Freeman are going to be your session champions. So we're going to be working on making sure that we're going through the slide deck, helping with the Mentimeter, trying to monitor the question answers, and also trying to help facilitate the questions. You guys can actually ask and vocalize your questions and your feedback to the presenters. We will have State Representative Lisa Cutter kind of share the background on Senate Bill 55. That's giving CDPHE the charge to develop a recommendation and house potentially an innovation center to develop end markets here in Colorado. Rachel Wilson-Roussel from CDPHE is going to share information about what the implementation is going to look like and the stakeholder process that CDPHE is going to launch. And then Alicia Marseille from Arizona State University is going to share some amazing case studies with us about how other states and cities have actually tried to tackle this around the country. And then we're going to launch into our brainstorming discussion. All right, so Representative Lisa Cutter, I will let you take it away.
Have to be off of mute to be able to do that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I love working with this group. And first I want to say that it's been an absolute pleasure working with this particular panel and how super prepared everyone is and knowledgeable. And I'm just really honored to be able to be part of it. So thank you. And also I need to tell you that it's just in general, all the people that are attending this conference, Recycle Colorado, all these groups, you guys are instrumental in helping us get to these decisions and making this legislation happen that's really going to change our state and help our economy and help our environment. So I am really grateful for the opportunity to work with so many brilliant stakeholders because nobody can know everything. So it's important to rely on the experts. So I was elected, I just finished my first term. Currently running again. And when I first was elected, you have to think of, I always would say, they'd ask what things you care about when you're campaigning and what don't I care about, right? There's so many things to be concerned about, but I always knew that the environment would be a key part of the legislation, my agenda moving forward. So I knew that zero waste, I pretty quickly zeroed in on zero waste. Once I realized I was born and raised in Colorado and I love this state and I love our natural beauty and I'm just it's such a privilege to live here. And when I realized that my perceptions as a person who grew up here of our state did not really match the reality in terms of recycling and the way we treated our environment, that was really shocking to me. We have some of you likely know this, we have about a 17% recycling rate here in Colorado compared with 35% nationally, and that's not okay. So that was really troublesome to me. So I also knew the power that recycling, that this whole thing has zero waste, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle, all the things add up to really impact climate change, which is also something very near and dear to me. We can reduce energy consumption by recycling. Composting reduces climate change damage. It serves as a carbon sink. And some of these things I think are sort of overlooked in the whole climate change picture. Lots of people are working on oil and gas and emissions and things like that. And this was an area that I just really felt like I could, an important piece of the puzzle, not just about trash, and it was an area that I could really make an impact on as a legislator. And so after I failed during my very first year as a legislator in 2019, I failed to move forward some zero waste legislation. And so I requested a zero waste committee, an interim committee. That's, it's a formal process you have to go through to, because there's lots of resources attached to it, a lot of, you have to assign budget and rooms and staff and all the things. And I didn't have really high expectations that I would actually be awarded this committee, but apparently leadership thought that at the House thought that it was also important. I should say leadership at the House and Senate, it's a joint decision. And so they did think it was important enough. And we had a bipartisan committee not this summer now, but last summer to explore all things zero waste, in which Recycle Colorado was immensely helpful in pulling together resources and helping us put together our agenda. They were a key partner in that, and also in getting that committee, because we did have to go through a formal process and sort of make a case about it. So super helpful in pulling that all together. And we did a lot of study as part of the committee. We visited different parts of the state and heard from all kinds of experts, and we were allowed 2 bills. We can move 2 bills forward. We can move as many bills as we wanted, but as part of the committee process, which they sort of have a special blessing, they go through the process a little bit more quickly and smoothly if they're committee bills. So as part of the committee, we got to run 2 bills. And this was one of the bills, the end market recycling bill that we're going to talk about today, was one of our bills that we focused on incentivizing the development of recycling end markets. And then we also did a compost study. One bill, the compost study, did not survive the COVID regrouping. We, after being sent home from the legislature early and then, you know, ended up coming back, our session was dramatically abbreviated, and we really realized that the need to focus on some immediate things to take care of people in Colorado, some things that we really needed to do quickly in response to the crisis. So the compost study, to my great sorrow, was I was a sponsor of that, was set aside because it had money attached. It had a fiscal note attached, and you may be aware Colorado's in and the pandemic, of course, exacerbated this budget crisis, and so we had to set that aside. But this bill, SB 28055, we felt like we still had a good case for this bill. It was not taking resources from anything else that, you know, there was a dedicated funding source. It wasn't drawing from our general fund and impacting any other critical expense. And we felt that this bill really would help move us forward in the right direction, move our economy forward in the right direction, and ultimately help us create jobs and lay the foundation for industry. So we were super excited to be able to get this one through, fought pretty hard. Senator Kevin Priola, I would love to give a shout out to him. He's not here to hear me, but which is probably better. He doesn't need to hear me praising him. He did a great job, worked really, really hard in doing a lot of stakeholding. He initiated this bill in the Senate, and then I sponsored it over on the House side along with my colleague, Representative Jenny Arndt. But Senator Priola and Senator Tammy Story ran it in the Senate, and he did a lot of work, and I just want to make sure and give him the full credit he deserves for pulling this together. So that's sort of the story and the evolution of the bill, but I'm just absolutely thrilled that we were able to put all the pieces together to lead us to this point. And again, grateful for the people who helped make it happen. And if you could show the first slide, I'll just briefly discuss the bill before we turn it over to Rachel. Thank you. So this is basically what Senate Bill 55 does. It directs CDPHE, when we have Rachel Wilson-Roussel here to talk a little bit more from CDPHE. It directs them to conduct a literature review of producer responsibility models to help fund recycling expansion. And it calls for the agency to conduct a statewide education campaign through social, broadcast, and print media about recycling. It provides a mechanism for personal property tax refunds for recycling businesses. So it gives some incentive that way. And it requires the department to ultimately recommend a structure and provide governing guidance for a recycling end market development center to support the development and expansion of end market businesses. So, and that's what we're here to brainstorm a little bit about and to talk more about. And I have to say, as a legislator, it's a real privilege to be part of this process too, because we don't often, you know, we run the bills, and depending on what it is, you know, we may not be in the weeds with how it all comes to fruition. And we say, there you go, Rachel, knock yourself out. So it's really going to be interesting for me to hear feedback and see what people say. So thank you for being here. Thanks for this opportunity. And I will turn it over to Rachel to talk a little bit more.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Cutter. And I just wanted to also say thank you to you, for your work to establish that Zero Waste Interim Committee, and for all the committee's hard work in diving into these complex issues. I think, as you noted, there was a lot packed into this bill, so that's really exciting. Just a quick introduction for myself. I oversee our sustainability programs here at CDPHE. Some of you may have attended the grant session yesterday that kind of went over our Recycling Resources Economic Opportunity Grant and Rebate Program, as well as our new Front Range Waste Diversion Enterprise Grant Program. So both of those are included in sustainability. And one of the great things about housing those waste diversion and recycling grant programs here is that we're really able to give that broader sustainability lens to this work and still forge these strong partnerships with our subject matter expert colleagues in the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division. So our sustainability group also houses our Green Business Program, and that provides pollution prevention technical assistance to businesses, as well as our environmental leadership program that recognizes businesses and organizations who go above and beyond environmental compliance and work towards sustainability goals. Our group also has a component of environmental justice work, and we sort of coordinate a lot of that work for the department. And we have a specific interest in finding ways to incorporate equity principles into all of our programs. So that includes questions like, how do we make recycling more accessible and affordable for all Coloradans to participate in? Go ahead with the next slide. So this was my best attempt at a matrix of sorts to dump a lot of information about Senate Bill 55 into one slide. This is for you folks who really like to be concise, but don't worry, I will be diving into each of these areas over the next few slides. If you don't mind a few acronyms, this is a great cheat sheet for you, just to keep straight some of the activities, stakeholders, and then funding sources for these funds. Next slide. So as Representative Cutter already mentioned, there are four main components and goals of this legislation, and I won't go through them now because we've already heard about them, but if you go to the next slide, I'm going to start focusing on that last piece with developing new incentives to support recycling businesses. So the bill authorizes both the Front Range Waste Diversion Enterprise Board of Directors, otherwise known as the Forward Board, and the Pollution Prevention Advisory Board, or PPAB, to consider developing programs that would provide a reimbursement to eligible recycling businesses for a portion of their business personal property taxes. So there's a couple of points here that I just wanted to highlight. The bill language, as you noted, is permissive. So making these reimbursements is at the direction or discretion of these two boards. And unlike other bill components, there's not a specific timeline associated with implementation. And as the bill was just recently signed last month, it will likely take some time for both of these entities to conduct some initial research to inform themselves on the issue, and then work to develop the structure, criteria, and finer details of what such a reimbursement program might look like. It will also take a little bit of time on our end of the department to implement the program once approved. So there's still a lot to work out here, but stay tuned for additional details. And later on, I'm going to give the website where you can go for more information on all of the Senate Bill 55 activities. And then lastly here on this slide, I just wanted to note the funding for the reimbursements would come from two existing sources, as Representative Cutter pointed out. So the RREO cash fund would provide any funding for reimbursements made to businesses outside of the Front Range, while the Forward Enterprise Cash Fund would cover businesses within the Front Range. So just a distinction between those two. Next slide. And here we'll start to focus on just on the activities that the department has been asked to lead. Observe that all three of these activities are again funded through the existing RREO program. So as Representative Cutter pointed out, there's not any new revenue associated with these activities. The bill simply redirected existing revenue. And so I think we all agree these are very exciting and worthwhile activities. I do want to let you all know that we've had to sort of adjust our plans for the year, and we're going to delay implementing another round of RREO mini grants so that we can work on these other activities. But have no fear, we heard loud and clear how popular the mini grants are, and we're very hopeful that they will return in the fall of 2021. So if you look at the first column here, it's to administer a statewide education campaign on recycling. The bill specifies the campaign to include radio and TV public service announcements, as well as social media assets and printed material. The bill also asks the department to consult with public and private recycling programs. So Sonia Hansen, who some of you may know and is a recent hire of our Forward program, will be leading up this effort. And we've already been talking to the Recycling Partnership, as well as our friends in North Carolina who worked on the Your Bottle Means Jobs campaign regarding their experiences and materials that may also benefit us in this campaign. And we'll be gathering initial feedback from a smaller group of existing volunteers working through our Pollution Prevention and Advisory Board Assistance Committee and Forward boards, but we will also be seeking broader feedback to help us focus the messaging of the campaign through surveys and interviews as necessary. If all goes well, we expect the first public service announcements to be airing in January 2021 and running through August. Next slide. And for these two remaining components, the activities in the stakeholder process is a bit more formalized. So you can sign up for either one of these stakeholder groups by going to the website and clicking on SB 055, which is somewhere in the middle of the page. I know our website is a mess, but this is the most concise link I could send you to that would fit on the screen. So hopefully you won't have any trouble finding it. We really tried to put just the bare bones up for the moment, but we will be adding to this content as time goes on and we make progress on implementation. So this is always a place that you can go back to if you're wondering about how things are advancing. And then looking at that middle column, the bill asks the department to conduct a producer responsibility literature review and develop policy and legislative recommendations and report back to the General Assembly by July 1st of 2021. So Emily Capps with CDPHE's Materials Management Unit, and who is also a Recycle Colorado board member, will be leading up this great work. And while the legislation didn't originally contemplate it, we felt it was important to engage stakeholders here as well to ensure that our recommendations are well supported and founded. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that the Pollution Prevention Advisory Board has been specifically interested in producer responsibility models and have volunteered to provide some extra assistance to Emily as she progresses. Next slide. And of course, what this session is really focused on is this last component, which is probably the central component and the first component in the bill itself, is around convening stakeholders in order to explore the governance and structure of Recycling Market Development Center here in Colorado. And so again, I just wanted to express my gratitude to Recycle Colorado and both Jennifer and Megan for leading up this session. While we're planning a formal stakeholder process, the opportunity to hear early on from you all is it will be incredibly helpful to us as we move forward. And I have been asked on a number of occasions to give my own recommendations for the center, but I think our role at CDPHE here is pretty clear. We're here to convene and listen, and really listen to what you all who may benefit from such a center would like it to be. So you may have also heard of the RREO funded program, Colorado Next Cycle. It's essentially our Colorado's first business incubator program focused on waste diversion. You could even say that it's a component of what a recycling market development center might be. So RRS, Resource Recycling Systems, has administered the Next Cycle program for us since 2018. And Yuri Freeman and his team there will be assisting us with the facilitation of the stakeholder process and some of the research that will go in behind this task. So we hope we can hold the first stakeholder meeting sometime in November. And the last slide. So again, I wanted to say thank you to Recycle Colorado and Representative Cutter, the Zero Waste Interim Committee, for developing this incredible piece of legislation. It's really an exciting time to be in Colorado, and we're just pleased as peaches to implement this bill. So please consider signing up for the stakeholder group, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any further questions on any of the things I presented today. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. We do have a quick question from John Lair before we move on. John asks, will it be allowed to award BPP tax refunds retroactively for prior years?
That's a great question, John, and I don't have the bill right in front of me, but I recall there being something about the current tax year written in there, so that would be something I would have to go back and look at. But if it's not something that is prohibited in the legislation, it would technically, I suppose, be available, since it is a reimbursement and means that you have to actually pay it before you can get a reimbursement. So it's a good question, and we'll have to look further into those details.
Awesome. Alicia, are you ready to tell us about all the other cool models for centers around the country? Awesome. Take it away.
Yep. Thank you. Good afternoon. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Some of the colleagues that we've worked with in Colorado on this call have heard me rant and rave about the amazing things that are happening in Denver and in Colorado broadly. So excited to be here and further the conversations and shed some light on some of the other things that are happening across the country. Again, Alicia Marseille, I am part of the Rob and Melanie Walton Sustainable Solutions Services at ASU. We are a knowledge, next slide. Next. I'm gonna give thumbs up for next. We are a unique department in the institution. For some of you that may know a little bit about ASU, we have a pretty amazing, incredible president who's irreverent about utilizing research and evidence-based knowledge inside the institution and applying it to solving some of humanity's greatest problems. We've been working in the space of circular economy for the last 5 to 7 years. One of the more notable projects that we've had is with the city of Phoenix. And developing what we call the Resource Innovation Solutions Network platform, where we worked on a series of projects, applied projects, research projects, as well as an incubator accelerator to advance early stage technologies. We're transitioning into what we're calling the future of circular innovation. And as you can see, those are some of the pillars that we're currently expanding and looking and doing work in. This is some of our impacts over the last 7 to 8 years. So as you can see, we work broadly internationally with a range of public and private and academic entities, of which you can see also that a lot of the work that we have done globally is also in the space of circular economy. So this is a quote. I thought it was very fitting. She's one of my favorite economists. She's an Italian-American. She has dual citizenship. She does a ton of work with the EU. But her views and interest in the space of innovation are really interesting, thought-provoking, and thinking about how innovation is done correctly across value chains and stakeholders through a process, as you can see, of co-creation can really co-shape markets and create opportunities that are mutually beneficial for both corporations, large businesses, as well as for the public too. Through our research, so again, these case studies that I'm going to show today are not nearly all of the examples, especially globally and even in the US, that exist in the space of circular economy innovation centers, programs, initiatives, et cetera. But it is a strong compiled list of ones that we've been following at ASU for several years, and they are broken down into 3 categories. So we look at, we've identified them as place-based initiatives. There's also marketplace-based initiatives, as well as regional approaches. This is one of my favorites. They were actually featured in the New York Times this past year. It's an amazing program is inside of a warehouse in downtown Chicago, and it's amazing because they have a wide range of programs, of which are community facing. They have some that are focused for K through 12 education and teaching circular concepts. They have an incubator accelerator program, so you can see the various types of companies that actually coexist there. But it's also amazing because the way that they've actually retrofitted the building is a closed loop system itself. So it's not just in terms of teaching the community, they actually are applying it to the businesses that they're working with and incubating it, but it's also the physical infrastructure that they've created a closed loop system also. This is one that was started several years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Circular Charlotte. The report online is actually pretty amazing. It was done by Metabolic. As you can see in the middle tier there, there's various types of programs, various types of initiatives that they're working on. This is still a very much a place-based program, just like Plant Chicago is place-based. It's been really controversial in Charlotte. The place-based portion, the government was, state and city government was going to fund the retrofit of a large building. It was roughly 15,000 square feet. And so controversy because it's this idea of you build it, will they come, versus how can you more organically build programs that engage the community more broadly to have an active participation in that. Next. Austin, Texas, they're also, they started shortly after we did here at ASU and with the city of Phoenix. It's a partnership also between the city of Austin and University of Texas, Austin. And so the city was, like Phoenix, one of the first cities where the Economic Development Department and the Public Works Department got together and co-funded a position that sat between the two of them. So circular economy is the idea of how do we take materials, extend their life cycle, and utilize it to become an economic development driver so that those individuals actually liaise between the two departments and focus on some of their own initiatives. And on the right side of this slide, you can see the city municipal side of the different types of programs and initiatives. And on the left side is the University of Texas Austin Incubator Accelerator Program. And so we actually at ASU work with the UT Austin Incubator Accelerator. They primarily focus in clean tech. We found there were a lot of similarities in trying to develop end markets with circular economy is probably what clean tech went through 15, 20 years ago. So there were a lot of similarities and things to be learned, a lot of sharing of knowledge between ASU and UT Austin there. Wait, if we could go back one, sorry. There's one really interesting thing to note. It's a pink box there on the municipal side, the reverse pitch competition. This was a really successful reverse pitch competition that the city of Austin did that was community facing, where they worked with community organizations to pitch problems that they had related to circularity and sustainability. And then over the course of 3 to 6 months, actually build teams, entrepreneurship teams to solve these problems, of which are funded. At the end, it's a pretty genius way to drive education and interest in this space to, again, get commitments and invested interest in the community as well, which will be imperative to the success. Materials marketplace. So some of you may have heard about the material marketplaces that exist. There is one in Austin, Michigan, Tennessee, Ohio. We have not found them to be as successful. It's a platform that is put online and different types of corporations or entities put materials online to exchange, to sell, but you're not addressing a primary issue and pivotal thing to think about in trying to accelerate circularity is shifting of paradigms around materials and waste. And so it's really hard if people, you put this platform online and people are thinking, well, why would I put my 10 tons of construction waste on there? Who's going to want it, right? And so that's a big obstacle to overcome. There is one that happened in New York City through New York City's Department of Sanitation that was in partnership with Ellen MacArthur Foundation and major fashion designer brands, and they set up 1,200 locations around the city to collect textiles. They also did, the New York City Department of Sanitation also did one, has a platform of their own that they run, and they actually have had a lot more success in connecting large amounts of commercial and industrial materials to end users, and they do the matchmaking themselves. Next. This is one of my favorites. So this is Kent County, Michigan. This is a regional approach. They have, as you can see in the upper left-hand quadrant of the slide there, they have a 250-acre resource innovation campus, similar to what the city of Phoenix did, but they have targeted and allocated land for startups all the way to large existing entities that would be able to process their materials. Part of the reason why it's one of my favorite examples is in the right quadrant, you'll see that's the map of Michigan, that's the rail map. So they really thought about how do we move materials, moving materials. I know from the keynote yesterday, Adam Hill talked about it, moving materials is really hard, via rail is a lot cheaper. And Kent County, Michigan, at the county level is working with cities nearby, Chicago, Indianapolis, Cleveland, cities that are via rail to actually ship materials to their resource innovation campus for processing. So being able to expand and being able to aggregate larger amounts of material is crucial in trying to accelerate circularity. The supply side. Next one. So this is, for those of you that have never seen a MRF, there in the upper left-hand corner is City of Phoenix's 27th Avenue Transfer Material Recovery Facility. If you've never done a MRF tour, it's definitely worth doing. It's pretty mind-blowing. From 2012 to 20, we did 25 research projects working with more than a dozen faculty and double that in terms of graduate students. City of Phoenix's waste diversion went from 16% to 38%. Some of the studies that we did looked at an economic impact assessment of material recovery, which ones have the highest return on investment. And then as you can see down below are risen incubator metrics for the 2.5 years we ran the program. This is another amazing example. Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. As you can see, the left side is their economic impact, the middle pillar, their environmental impact, and the right are their 4 key program areas. It's amazing because it is a regional approach. It is somewhat place-based, but they have a decentralized approach. So for example, their organics processor is co-located at the zoo. So they're able to, the private entity that's processing the organics is able to obviously get a lot of organic material there from the zoo. So developing different types of partnerships across regions to aggregate materials, to process materials, and to develop those end markets across the state. This is another one, amazing one that actually Jennifer Freeman, who's on the call, brought to our attention on a visit, and my colleagues and I have since been down a rabbit hole researching this. The Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative, it's pretty amazing. It is a bottle bill state, but it is an example of a bottle bill state done really well. There's definitely strong public-private partnerships there. They have, I think now they're close to 500 employees. As you can see, they recover a tremendous amount of materials. And what's interesting is the bottle bill doesn't dictate the deposit, it dictates the return. So the other interesting thing is that they do have a retailer component. So as you can see on the right side, people drop their bottles there. Retailers are not always really fond of people coming in with their bottles. But if you go to the other side of that diagram, to the bottle drop side, it says retailers bottle drop, a significant portion of their material recovery actually comes from these bottle drop sites versus retailers, and they have freestanding buildings that had either reverse machines or employees bringing in materials. And if I recall, their contamination rates are also extremely low. So really successful model. And they've actually seen a tremendous amount of secondary markets developing from this also. That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into kind of our brainstorming session here in a second. But Jennifer, if you can help me, are there any burning questions that you kind of saw popped in the chat before we move into this facilitated discussion?
No questions so far in the chat.
Awesome. Cool. So what is going to happen is Alicia is going to kind of help facilitate this discussion with some kind of assistance from Jennifer and I as well. So I'm going to lead us through the Mentimeter survey questions that will come up here. And then Jennifer is going to help us with seeing your guys' questions. So if you guys do want to type a question into the chat, we can definitely do that. But I think, you know, Rachel and the rest of us were hoping for more of that in-person facilitated brainstorming type atmosphere the best we can, considering the fact that we're remote. So if you're comfortable enough, our recommendation is that you actually raise your hand, which is in the meeting controls. And then, you know, we'll be notified that you did raise your hand. Jennifer will try to keep track of these. She will essentially call on you when she's ready and say, so-and-so is ready to share something or ask a question. She'll encourage you to unmute yourself. And then, you know, Alicia will kind of direct the question based on where it should go, whether it's to Representative Cutter, Rachel, or if it's something that maybe Alicia might want to dive into a little bit further. And then after that, if you guys can just try to remember to lower your hand, we'll also try to help you with this as well. But your hand doesn't automatically lower itself, obviously, once you're done talking. And then, so these should be some keyboard shortcut options, by the way, whether you have a Windows or a Mac, to raise or lower your hand. So hopefully that will help. Alt-Y or Option-Y, depending upon your keyboard. Okay, so we're gonna return back to the Mentimeter tool. I see that we have several more participants than we first started. So I'm gonna kind of walk through the same instructions I did earlier to try to kind of walk us through this tool. So Mentimeter kind of is a little bit different than some of the other Zoom polling tools we've been using. It's going to register live in this presentation and kind of be recorded with the presentation. So you guys will need a smartphone, tablet, or computer. And if you're using a computer, just try to maneuver it so you can still see the Zoom window and obviously see the Mentimeter window at the same time. And if you guys just type into a browser menti.com exactly, it should take you to a browser where you can then just type in this code, 3798743, on the top bar of the screen to vote. So I'm going to get mine pulled up, and then we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to try it out together.
I just posted instructions on how to participate in the Mentimeter survey. And then we need to go through really quickly one more time, Megan, how you raise your hand.
Okay, so there should be an option like in your chat window, essentially, for you guys to click. It should say more or something like that, and that's how you can raise your hand. And then if we go back, it should also have this option of Alt-Y or Option-Y. If you're having challenges, feel free to just post your question in the chat, and we can get to you as well.
And I just saw that Randy Mormon had a good question in regards to the Carolina End Market Centers. That is a good example of another end market center, and in partnership with the Department of Commerce. And that is one that is run by public entities, right? And they've done, actually, you're absolutely right. They've done a tremendous job, and I know that they've been able to also create new. That does matchmaking on the material side, but then they've also been able to use it as an economic development driver in job creation and creation of new businesses. Good example, Randy.
Are you guys seeing the extra feedback and help from the Zoom wonks in the conference call? We appreciate you. Also look for the raise your hand function at the bottom of the participants chat. or the participants panel, excuse me.
Awesome. Okay, so let's try to dive in here. So we're gonna have this Mentimeter question. Great, people are already filling it out. I love it. So this is kind of a word cloud. So the question is, what is Colorado's greatest asset to attract new end market businesses to the state? And people are filling out a lot of different options. This is great. It's changing really quickly. That's awesome. So kind of as people obviously felt the same thing, some words will get bigger than others. And you should have 3 options. So I'll give everyone a second to do that. I'm seeing things like growing economy, and Alicia, feel free to jump in here too.
Yeah,
Tax
new
incentives,
technology.
Grant funding, Rachel.
Tax incentives, yeah, absolutely. Those are important.
Awesome. Okay, so I think
There is great weather also.
Yeah. Yes.
It's 114
Absolutely.
here today, so Colorado sounds nice. Yeah, these are all great.
Absolutely. I'm going to give everyone maybe 20 more seconds, and then I'm going to close it just so it'll say static, so you can take a look at it a little bit better as a group.
Somebody said Recycle Colorado. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Workforce, that's a good one that we haven't talked about a lot.
Yeah. Growing economy.
Yeah, and the workforce is a good one, and that Carolinas is a good example of the workforce one, as well as the Oregon Bottle and Recycling Cooperative. Both have strong workforce components.
All right.
Okay, I just closed voting, so this should be relatively static now. Awesome. Should we go on to the next question, Alicia, or do you want to dive into this further?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Cool. Okay, so this is getting caught up too. So what is the biggest challenge to attract end market businesses to Colorado is the question. And this is another word cloud, so you should be able, I think, to type in another 3 options. And if for some reason, like it ever like logs you guys out or anything, you can always retype in the code and refresh, and it should pull back up for you based on where we are in the presentation, hopefully.
Yeah, transportation's a big one with the mountains there. Hauling materials. The glass example, is that in reference, I wonder, related to being able to collect enough glass to supply the demand of the end market?
No, my Mentimeter is ahead one.
Oh, shoot.
So I thought that was still for the last question.
Oh, oops.
Same with the Recycle Colorado comment.
Sorry, Tom.
It's all good. I didn't read.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know we don't think Recycle Colorado would be the biggest challenge. For some.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no kidding. Wonder if I can go back and restart it. I'm not sure. I could try.
For what it's worth, my Mentimeter has a different question on it. It wants to know the most efficient way to structure the Innovation Center.
Yeah, that's what
Not the
mine's
only one
doing
with
right now
overhead.
too, actually. It's jumping to the next slide. Bummer. Okay, does anyone want
Yeah,
to just
I would
pop in with maybe like biggest challenges then?
Feel free to jump in
Facilitate
the chat with
Yeah.
those.
Sorry about the glitch here, guys. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, high cost of living is a good
Labor
one.
is another one that's popping up. Lack of data, low landfill rates, cost of transportation. The
Yeah,
recyc-
Jamie's comment on the more collection of recyclable materials is a huge one. Being able to collect enough to supply
Yeah.
the end markets is always a big one.
yeah, lack of supply materials.
Droughts and fires, yeah, absolutely.
Lack of consistent systems to provide feedstock from Caroline and Fort Collins.
Yeah, those are all good.
Okay. Well, now we can go to the next one I think is on everyone's screen, hopefully, and it won't mess it all up. Okay, so what do you think is the most efficient and effective way to structure the Innovation Center? So this is multiple choice. I think you can only select one. So the options are housed in a nonprofit, housed in a higher education institution, housed in CDPHE, housed in OEdit, housed in a public-private partnership that's looking very popular, and 4% for others so far. So I'll leave this open a bit longer.
I'm
A bit
kind of,
longer, but there's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
No, I was just going to say it's taking a while to populate, but there's a clear differentiation between them there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be interested to hear why folks chose these options and kind of what other ideas that weren't an option here. What other suggestions are there out there that aren't provided here? So if you can share your preference, why you chose, nonprofit, higher ed, et cetera, and what other options, if you were one of the 2% that chose other, what else should we consider in the chat function? That would be great.
It looks like John Lair raised his hand. John, if you want to unmute and share, I think we can try that.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Hey
All
there.
right. Howdy. I chose the public-private partnership option mostly because I think that time could be of the essence here, and the ability to be nimble and move quickly could be really important, and those aren't always the hallmarks of government and nonprofit and higher ed. So something that involves the private sector as well as those other sectors might help things move quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm a business owner, so I have a bias on this. I'll admit up front. All right.
Anyone else have thoughts they'd like to share? Please feel free to raise your hand. Getting some good feedback in the chat function as well.
Looks like Raj raised his hand.
Yeah,
If you
go
wanna...
ahead, Raj.
All right, and I put it down as well. Yeah, my opinion is that you guys almost need to figure out who's going to be the best organization that can facilitate the most stakeholders, from public, private, nonprofit, all the different set. And it could be any one of these. John's comments were John's comments were spot on as well, depending on how nimble and reactive and agile this organization needs to be. It might need to be housed somewhere else, so time might be of the essence. But I think I just wanted to throw that out, that it's a matter of how you can engage all the players in the value chain and outside of the value chain that influence material flow. So my 2 cents.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you call on me?
I did call on you.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't hear. Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far in the public-private partnership, and just, the other choices, I think they have a lot of good and bad things to consider, and like government, for example, while that could be good, I know there's, political pushback on that front that we ran into when we were looking at Senate Bill 55 specifically. Mm-hmm. And then I would also say on higher ed, I think, my challenge is that we have such a wealth of good experts, quality experts throughout many of our universities and colleges throughout the state. So choosing just one university or college over the other, I think leads to, maybe closing out some of those other expertise. So that's my one concern about that. And so I'm hoping, maybe a different setup would invite all of those university experts to participate in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. That's great feedback. Thank you, Randy. Let's see who else. Any others? Anyone else want to weigh in here before we move on?
Was there anything you wanted to add as well, Alicia?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tom has actually put a great point in terms of the public-private partnership is who gets to play in that environment. But similar to what Randy said, how do you create a public-private partnership? And it doesn't necessarily have to be between a few organizations. It could be much more inclusive to a broader set of organizations across not just the value chain, but also in terms of, say, universities. You guys have Colorado School of the Mines there, which is great for engineering, but they don't necessarily have business. And so from our experience in circularity, especially in looking at like return on investments and economic impact, the business component is also pretty crucial. And so there might be an opportunity to create a broader set of partners that are part of that PPP that could play and then make it more inclusive. And something that we've talked about also on our team is how to include the social components into the work and what that would look like, and making sure those organizations also have a voice in the work.
Yeah, and Ellen and Tenzin are bringing up a really interesting point. They're not thinking about this in terms of materials or systems. They're thinking about it in terms of communities and people and population. And how do we engage with, to quote Ellen here, how do we engage populations who are often overlooked racially or economically?
Yeah, and also because oftentimes recycling centers are housed in what are traditionally lower income neighborhoods, and so you end up with the not in my backyard or NIMBY issues, and how to include them in that so that doesn't occur. But also, if you're driving circular economy, how do they have more of an active participation in benefiting from the circular economic development efforts?
Fantastic, and I think that's right. And on the flip of the coin too is how do you conquer some of the NIMBY issues while still creating access to those communities that may not have a car to drive up, recycling to, or how do you incentivize those folks to recycle when it's not as convenient for them? Anything else before we want to move on to the next question? All right, Megan, let's take it away to the next slide. The next question on the survey, please.
All right, so what non-industrial material should the center try to address first? This is multiple choice, I believe. You can pick one.
Hard choice.
Mm-hmm. Again, if you have any thoughts that you need to expound on here with this question, then please feel free to raise your hand or enter your thoughts into the chat function. Go ahead, Alicia.
I was just going to say it's really interesting that glass is still at 0 because that's the one that's closest to actually circularizing.
Good point. Yeah.
Maybe it's just people are like, we've got that. We're almost there.
Right. Randy, did you have some thought? Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just actually going to add to the glass comment that Alicia made. I think it's important. I mean, it is really important for the center to focus on bringing new end markets to the state for sure. But I think also part of the tasks and priorities should also be how to help existing end markets that we have here. So glass, definitely we need to think about how do we keep that going and build it as well.
Yeah. That's a fantastic point, Randy. Thank you. John, do you want to add?
Yeah, being the glass guy, I pick plastics. Honestly, I think that it should be material agnostic. I think that, we should be developing tools, techniques, processes for developing circularity of all materials, regardless of what they are. That's my opinion. I mean, obviously, I'd welcome support for glass. Don't get me wrong. But I think if we're picking and choosing, I mean, sure, we got to start somewhere, right? But we should be focused on trying to develop circularities for everything that we have.
Absolutely. Alicia, I'd be curious, other centers like this, do they have a tendency to kind of do what John was saying, where it's kind of a plethora of different support options, or is there a benefit to potentially targeting material by material?
Great question. So, organics is one that, you know, it's one of the higher volumes, has one of the higher volumes, and has actually easier type of systems or technology-based solutions to divert it. It has it can have some of the harder end market developments to actually build out, but it's a great way to move the diversion needle, if you will. I don't know, I haven't seen any that focus specifically on a stream like this. Plastics is one of the hardest, actually. So not necessarily PET, HDPE, and LDPE in terms of the end markets, but the 3 through 7s are really hard. Not a lot of options. And yeah, and right now I think plastics, you know, how do we create end markets regionally versus, I can't remember the statistics, it's something like 80% of our PET, like in Phoenix, actually goes to Mobile, Alabama, to Mohawk carpet, right? So that's a tremendous amount of GHGs on that. And so regions like Phoenix, when we have, it's the 5th largest city, that, you know, we still don't even have enough PET through some of our research between all 22 cities to actually attract a larger size processor in Phoenix. That was part of our economic impact assessment with the city of Phoenix. We don't, between all the cities, don't have enough PET. I know the city's working on attracting a mid-size processor, but not for a larger size processor. So yeah, plastics is the harder nut to crack, if you will.
Hey, this is Adam. Can I talk real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for it.
you can raise your hand, Adam, but we'll go ahead and let you talk.
I don't have a hand raising thing going on in my service.
Okay. No worries, man.
Go ahead, Adam.
I just wanted to say on that note, I feel like all of this kind of plays in, you know, we're talking about a PET processing center. The reason that you don't see a lot of them is because they're really, really expensive to set up. And the reason that they're really expensive to set up is because you have the bottle that has the label, that has the cap, that has the thing that holds the cap. And I think that all of our discussions on packaging, development centers, processing, it all kind of is commingled. You know what I mean? If the bottles weren't as difficult to recycle, the facilities wouldn't be as expensive to put up, and you wouldn't have to ship the material to Alabama in order to, you know, get it recycled. So I just wanted to add that bit of a caveat. And then I have some really good ideas on as far as like the recycling center stuff, but I'll let the other people go. But yeah, I think we should definitely move this discussion forward.
Well, you have the link to participate in CDPHE's process. So please go there and submit your information. Raj, I'll get to you in just a second. We have a good question here that I wanted to raise from Sean McAllister. I've heard cardboard and paper is one of the easiest to recycle and convert to new products, but single stream recycling hurts the quality. Are there end markets for the recycled cardboard or paper in Colorado? And how do we improve the quality of material with some single stream recycling systems? Who wants to take that one?
Well, there isn't one in Colorado, right? I can answer part of the question.
There you go.
So I have that piece. Alicia, do you want to try?
Yeah, they're really water intensive. So that's also part of the reason why we don't have one here in Arizona. They're really, really water intensive. And really quick in regards to what Adam was saying, he's spot on. Those PET processors are extremely expensive. And so you run into some of the same issues that actually public MRFs run into. Materiality and products change so much that if you're going to make a $30 million investment and 3 to 5 years later, the materials change, what happens to the investment, or what types of other things do you have to outfit on your equipment to process those materials? And that's a massive challenge in some of these processors. So we think some of the answers are actually micro decentralized models, and Colorado has some strong examples in that space.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think
Before we
Raj
have-
had his hand up.
Raj, he put it back down again.
Oh.
Raj, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to tack on to what Alicia said. I was going to say that after Adam's comment, because he's got the business that does this. It's small scale, it's decentralized, it's not capital intensive, and we're working on, and to some of the other comments that were made, I think Ellen made it, somebody else made it in the chat box about inclusivity. So if you start doing smaller, more affordable, decentralized processing systems like direct polymer as an example, then you can start creating jobs and start doing local economic development around these waste streams versus having to build a $20 million processing facility. So just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, and David Oliver's comment just now in the chat box is also spot on between, how do we find opportunities regionally, even beyond our state boundaries, to share materials? Because it's a lot easier and has positive benefits to the environment to ship to Colorado. Like, could we, put our glass on a train and send it to Colorado, and vice versa? Like, if we were to strategically collaborate on end market developments that could support bringing in and aggregating enough materials to support the end markets and even to California.
Wow.
Great.
Next one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right, so what state and local policies do you recommend are enacted to support the center's mandate? And I think this is a ranking question. So extended producer responsibility, landfill bans, mandates, preemption, and we kept it pretty limited, so other. And so I'm sure we'll want to dive into what other is for a lot of people as well.
EPR is absolutely a good one. We've seen through our research examples where states actually do have EPR in place, like New York, and in our conversations with the Department of Sanitation there, part of it was written so long ago that they haven't revisited it. They need to revisit it, and there are a lot of loopholes that have been discovered, and so it's really hard for them to actually, at this point, actually mandate and without revisiting some of their older guidelines there with EPR. So how you write them is crucial.
Awesome. And I think some folks might be having an issue with this one. I know I am as well. So if people want to kind of pop in the chat as like whether you selected other or whether you want to provide feedback, that might be helpful. If for some reason your Mentimeter isn't working for this slide for some reason.
So we only have 6 responses so far, it looks like, but please feel free to use that chat function.
Okay, hopefully going back and forth might have reactivated it for some folks.
There we go.
Here we go.
Again, please feel free to jump in with any additional discussion or points or questions you'd want to raise on this slide. I guess there's one thing that I, as a private sector person, and I know that there's a lot of those folks out there from the producer side, from the manufacturer side. I think what companies like Swire and Coca-Cola and many others like us are coming to the realization of is that we have an impact. We are trying to do things to reduce our impact. Some of you participated in the last panel with adding circularity to your business, where our sustainability director, Mike Bernier, participated, and we're putting some science-based goals behind our efforts. I think what's important here is that there is a congruent attitude shift. So as companies and manufacturers, and not all of us are the same, not all of us are going to have the same attitude towards doing the right thing and trying to get, right now our recycled content is 25 to 30%, just depending on where in our territory you are. We're aiming for 50% by 2030. We will always have people who say that's not enough. And there are going to be some people who don't care. But what's, I think, really important for us to recognize is that there are going to be people who come to the table, and we're going to have to meet them to a certain extent where they are. And we have to be in a place where our attitude towards those producers change as well. So instead of approaching public policy or using extended producer responsibility as a punishment or as we're holding you accountable, think about it as this is a fantastic opportunity for these businesses to recapture materials that they're going to use anyway. And it's cheaper, it's better for the environment, it is a guaranteed feedstock. However you structure the system, I think it's really important to shift attitudes on both sides of the seesaw so that we can all come to the table without a negative connotation of in polarity. I think that's really important, and I just wanted to raise that in this conversation. Who else has something to say? I'll stop talking now.
Is there anyone that might have put other that wants to kind of elaborate on that, or folks that have any particular strong feelings one way or the other? Or Alicia, do you want to pop in at all?
I would say Brent Porter has a really good comment in the chat box. The center should keep the idea of what's the goal and what does solving the recycling problem look like versus how do we make incremental change. That's a really, really great point, Brent, and that's actually the way that we usually approach it. It's like road mapping, backcasting. So what does success look like? And then try to figure out how we get there. Because oftentimes the incremental changes or the incremental plans are more disjointed versus what's the overall goal and what does success look like, and then you build a roadmap of how you'll get there. It's a great point. Adam's hand is up again.
Okay, Adam, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, particularly in Colorado, because we live in a very weird spot. If you go to the east or west coast, you see very high volumes of materials being generated. We have volume, but it's nothing compared to a lot of areas of the country, and it's because of our geography. So specific to Colorado, I think, I would choose other just because I think it's a combination of everything. You talk about mandates, but you don't want to mandate that Coca-Cola has to put all of their bottle scrap back into a bottle because there might be crazy FDA regulations. I know they want to do that, and I know they're aiming to do that, but to mandate them to do that could cost them a ton of money, which then prohibits their growth. But I could take their bottle and I could run it into a sheet, right? Like a PET sheet or something that is not an FDA approved product. I think landfill bans, are totally dependent on the area, the region, the location, whatever it is, because different products are being generated in different areas all the time. I think the extended producer responsibility is kind of the same thing. I do think that they should have some skin in the game, but say like I want to cut a deal with Coca-Cola and I say, hey, let's go in together on the investment to put a bottle deposit program in place that we work with the state of Colorado. We invest together. Coca-Cola puts money up front to cover the bottle machines, and we cut a contract for 10 years to process the bottles and send it back into their products, right? I mean, there's so many different ways to do this, but I think everybody's kind of trying to make it universal. I absolutely think that there should be mandates on things like, if I'm going to make a plastic pallet, right? We talked to Coca-Cola and Ball and everybody, Coors today was talking about, we went from wood to plastic pallets. If it's something like a pallet, they 100% should be mandated to put recycled content in a high fill plastic pallet type product, right? So it's sort of circumstantial with everything, but I think we really need to start paying attention to the details of our area and what makes sense, and stop trying to make everything like universal rules where we do this and we do that and Arizona's doing this. I mean, we do need to pay attention to the other models, but it does need to be specific to our area, specifically because we're in Colorado and it's a very weird area of the country to do recycling. Things need to travel very far distances. It's very expensive to operate. Finding good labor at this point is very hard. If you want to do a facility upgrade, you know, we were talking about bringing end use markets here, and Colorado is growing so fast. Excel might be 12 months out on getting a company in here just to get them power. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff to look at. I'll stop talking, but yeah, I do think we need to, I think it's kind of all of the above, and it really needs to be developed around each individual area or region of the state and our region of the country. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. It looks like Zan's got her hand up, and we want to hear from her. We haven't heard from Zan yet. Zan, go ahead. Floor is yours. Suzanne?
You're still muted.
Are you on mute?
Yeah. There you go. Try again.
Okay. So sorry.
You're good.
I just wanted to say, hey, this is a fantastic session, and Alicia, you're amazing. So thank you. I wanted to highlight a remark that actually Bill Germain made in the chat earlier, which is, I think deserves underscoring, which is, in addition to just figuring out what to do materials, this idea of circularity and reducing waste in the first place by reuse strategies is actually should be also something that the center embraces. And I think in the very first plenary of this summit, I think you guys mentioned Loop and to-go containers as examples of successful subscription services. And I think we should think about that as well. There could be some really creative, I don't know, economic growth around those sorts of ideas if we really think out of the box. So I guess I just thought that is worth everybody reflecting on and seeing if other ideas are generated from that comment.
That actually will dovetail into, I don't think it's the next slide, but the slide after we actually asked that question. So that's really great. Thank you.
Thanks, Zan.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Alicia.
No, go ahead.
Nope. You're the expert here.
No,
take it.
No. I was just going to say that was a great comment. And the repair, the reuse side is something that's often, sorry, there's an ice machine behind me. It's often not talked about. And actually New York City has a small company that has a tremendous repair component to their business model, and they actually are using workforce to retrain and retool people on how to repair things versus throwing them away. And so being innovative across the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle is imperative. And I think someone had a comment earlier I do not want to lose sight of, because it was really good in regards to incentives. Incentives are everything, and it ties back to what Jennifer was saying with EPR and kind of Adam also. There's always a carrot and a stick, right? And the stick isn't always the most effective, but carrots like incentives can be huge drivers in helping to and being creative with incentives. Tax incentives are great, but there's also a lot of other types of ways to create incentives to drive success in these areas.
Well, and as part of the center, what I was going to say is, as part of the center, that's an entirely viable, that's the disruptor, right? That's the repurpose, the reuse mechanism is the disruptor. It's the Uber, it's the Lyft of the taxi industry, if you will, where you can create entire business models around some ideas like that, and can be a very fascinating and innovative component of what the center does. So thanks to everyone who raised that. Anyone else before we want to look at
The next one?
the next slide?
Okay.
Because I think we're coming down to time here, yeah?
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, let's activate this. All right, it looks like we already had some people participating, which is great. So what can the center offer that will create the greatest impact to foster circularity here in Colorado? And this was kind of another ranking one, I believe. So aggregating data sources on material generation, trying to make sure we actually know where materials are being generated, where it's coming from, and what the quantities are. Fund research and development, so like actually funding R&D, because that's not something we really have in the state currently. You know, actively recruit end users to site in Colorado, obviously, prioritize and target each material, offer tax incentives, and obviously other is an option. So I'd love to generate some discussion around this as well.
We're coming up
I
on
am
the
definitely biased.
Okay, go for it, Alicia.
Doing a quick time check.
I'm definitely biased to
5 minutes.
Sorry.
5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes left in the session, so just want to give us
Okay.
time.
Go for it, Alicia.
I'm biased to research and development, of course, but partially because it's really, you know, trying to understand what's going to work and what isn't, and not just for today, but ultimately where you're trying to go and to be successful. And then I would think one thing that's also missing here and food for thought is the attraction model, so actively recruiting. So the economic development model of attraction is great, but it's equally as important to start to figure out how do you kind of home grow and build startups in a startup community in Colorado to foster this and create a long-term pipeline and active amount of invested interest at the community level in these efforts also.
Awesome. So this is one of our second to last slides. So I think we're doing all right. But does anyone have any additional feedback, comments they want to make before we move on?
Randy just raised a point that CDPHE is working hard to bring in OEDIT into this process so that there's economic development agencies involved as well.
Awesome.
Let's move on to the next slide as we're down to our last 4 minutes.
Okay. Oops, sorry, let me go back. There we go. So should the center also help reduce waste produced along the supply chain? So trying to get at Suzanne's point earlier around, you know, reuse, potentially repair, reducing waste, kind of along that value chain.
Yes, good, good.
Awesome. Anyone want to provide any thoughts, feedback with, you know, the couple of minutes we have left? Feel free to chime in.
I just want to say I appreciate some of the comments around innovation in particular. You know, and also, I'm sorry, I can't remember who made this comment about, to me, it was about looking at it holistically, like instead of, you know, here's what we're going to do this year and this year, what's the end goal that we want to get to, and then figuring out how to do that. And that's going to involve a lot of innovation. I think we're smart people. We have a big problem. And if we can empower and incentivize and help people to get to that, understand the problem firstly, and then help incentivize or whatever we do to help people get there, I think that's what's really going to change this. So I'm just super excited to be involved in this brainstorm and hear all this great thinking.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I don't have anything.
No.
I was going to say that there's a lot of positive response to James Cody's comment in regards to life cycle. It's really important. That's a really amazing, important point, and that's actually what we talk a lot about. We're talking a lot about right now at ASU, and looking at the entire value chain from when a product's made to when it's disposed, and you know how to create some type of structure to account for externalities. And so people don't see their, you know, people see the responsibility from when it's created to when it's disposed of and how it's disposed of across that whole entire value chain.
Awesome. Anything else, you guys? Okay, well, thank you all so much for participating in this session. We actually also have a SurveyMonkey link out. It is here on the slide. Jennifer can also paste it in the chat. If you guys want to provide additional feedback, it has some open response options, so you can write to your heart's content about all the ways that we think we can build circularity here in Colorado. And then obviously just another plug, if this is something you're passionate about, please sign up to join the stakeholder group that the state's putting together for SB 55 and be involved in that process moving forward. And I think this actually concludes our summit. So thank you to all of our presenters and thank you all for participating in the summit. You know, would have been great to see you all in person this year. So this is kind of bittersweet in a lot of ways, but we're really happy to have so many people come out and storm to support this organization and to participate in these really important conversations. So thank you all for your time, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.